So we are back with part 2 of our talk on inclusion and accessibility in publishing and literature. We had a discussion a couple weeks ago with Lillie Lainoff, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. She is in school. So we miss her voice and her work, but we're going to mention some things that she brought up that she wanted to make sure we touched on. And we are here to do part 2 to finish up our conversation, give everybody some action points that they can do this kind of work from. And yeah, with that, we're going to reintroduce ourselves. I am Courtney Craven, founder of caniplaythat.com, a media outlet for disabled gamers and a learning hub for game developers.
Hi, my name is Shun. I am a writer and editor out of Southern California. I am the author of 2 books, the most recent of which is Pinups, a memoir about my long, ragged affair with outdoor sports and what that's taught me about representation in the outdoors, and a columnist for the Writer magazine, where I write about publishing and writing.
Hi, I'm Dolly Chugh. I'm a professor at New York University in the business school. I teach courses on management and leadership and negotiations, and I'm a social psychologist. I study unconscious bias and more broadly what I call the psychology of good people. I'm an author of The Person You Mean to Be, How Good People Fight Bias, and I have a monthly newsletter called Dear Good People.
And I am Kishonna Gray, assistant professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago in Gender and Women's Studies and Communication. I'm the author of Intersectional Tech, a book that just came out a few weeks ago about the experiences of Black gamers online. And I am, this topic is near and dear to my heart because because of all the struggles of publishing, especially because of the bodies that we are in.
All right, so last time in the first video, we touched on definitions and just what a good starting point for this kind of discussion so that everybody starts on the same page and we have an understanding of where the 4 of us are coming from. This time, we are going to jump into a list of questions that we have drafted. So let's go ahead and just dive right into that. We left off with wondering how we sell accessibility, and I think we covered that because, unfortunately, as marginalized writers, we're always in the position of selling ourselves. So we have to sell, why do you need accessibility? Why do you need inclusion? Why isn't what we're already doing good enough? So we covered that, and now we are going to go into what it means to be pigeonholed in your industry and why that may not always be a bad thing. I was a student of Shun's at SNHU, and in the class she told me, and I thought it at the time, I definitely disagreed with it at the time, but in hindsight it was a good idea, a good piece of advice, that being pigeonholed is not that bad, and it's not something that I can control. Writing queer fiction, as a queer person, that's what I'm going to be labeled. And I think that instead of fighting it, for me, it was important to just understand that that's what it is and learn how to use it to my advantage. So I want to talk a little bit about how we can use our identities as an advantage to get us where we want to be in our careers and help others get to those same places.
It's a great question, Courtney. And since you've called me out for being the terrible wet fish in the face professor, I will take that question. So I fought it for a long time too. And every semester I get a student either at Southern New Hampshire University or at Bay Path, where I also teach in the Master of Fine Arts program, who says to me, I don't want to be seen as a Latinx writer. I don't want to be seen as an Asian writer. I just want to be a writer. And that's beautiful. That's an extraordinary pipe dream, but the society we live in will not allow us to do that. Publishing, according to the latest Lee and Low baseline study of diversity in publishing, which is something we'll put in the show notes because it's a really great study, it's 87% white at the gatekeeper level. And that's really sad. In my own experience, you get the whole like, oh, we did an Asian book last year, right? Or your character needs to speak more broken English because she's Asian. And it's like, oh, but I don't understand. She's American. How can she be more Asian? You know, oh, well, you should have her write about food some more. Oh, okay. What? I'm so confused about all this, right? But I think what this is telling us is clearly that there's more need for more diverse representation, but also I think I always look to the next generation when I'm thinking about the battles that we're fighting today, right? And I take real strength in the idea that the more we can put marginalized voices out there, the more we can flood the market so that these marginalized voices become more central, the more we can help to normalize these narratives, right? And I think about how important it is for somebody like me to know that Amy Tan was out there writing narratives, and to know that Gish Jen was out there writing narratives, right? And so I kind of take that to heart, you know, and look forward, because right now, if I'm being really honest, and we strive to be nothing less, right? It is really painful to think that we are being pigeonholed and that we are expected to tell a certain type of narrative. But I think that there is a way forward from that, and the next generation is probably gonna make it happen.
So
Go ahead.
Kishonna, go, because I was going to ask a question. You might be answering my question.
I think I'm just going to add, you know, to that and add an additional example. I am fascinated, you know, with this concept of like, you know, like being pigeonholed, right? Because I think there may be like a couple things happening. You know, I think, you know, the structure might force us, you know, as Shun, you know, was talking about, you know, the structure kind of forces us, you know, based on like our identities to tell and do certain stories. But I think that there's also something like cultural, like there's like a cultural calling, you know, where like, for instance, you know, like the things that I write, I only want to really write about, you know, like Black people, right? You know, and I think that I have a cultural imperative. I have like a cultural responsibility, you know, being in this position. And that I want to do that. You know, I want to like elevate like these stories, you know, of like Blackness, like at the intersection, you know, and so people can see, you know, like Black queer stories and Black disabled stories, and like have like these kinds of narratives. So I know that, but that's different, because let's say I don't know how I would feel if somebody said, Kishonna, you should just do that. You know, I can't really speak to that, you know, because there's a different kind of like tradition, you know, from the literary world that you all are like speaking from like the academic world. Because like I look at the academic world and I'm like, okay, these stories aren't there. It's my job like to put them there. The other point that, you know, I also wanted to make was I feel that for me and the generation that I'm in, I am in between two dynamic generations of Black cultural producers, right? You know, I came from like, you know, this off the backs of maybe like the 80s Black folks rooted a lot in like respectability politics, trying to like tame down, you know, all of that Black power and Black pride and the afros, you know, from like, you know, like the 60s and the 70s. And then people were like, okay, we just have to calm down. They let us in the door. Now we want to stay. So, you know, let's speak like they speak. Let's dress like they speak. Let's eat the foods that they're eating, you know? And then, you know, I come along and I'm like, well, okay, that's cool. And also I'm like the code switching generation, right? You know, where we learn those skills like so we could get along, so we can get in the door, so we can stay in, you know, but then, you know, you have this generation after me that's like, you know, F that, you know, we're bringing in our curry chicken into the workplace. We're wearing our afros again. So I think it's really like interesting just to see how like the different generations have like different experiences of, you know, what they're going to do, and, you know, the different aspects of like their identity that they're going to celebrate proudly too. So I just wanted to just make those couple of comments.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. So I loved the origin story, which I never knew of how this all came to be. So I want to make sure I understood what was the piece that, Courtney, that you changed your mind on? Like what do you now agree with that you didn't agree with before?
I think a lot of it had to do with can I play that, and feeling like Kishonna said, it was my job to give these narratives a space.
Okay,
you know,
got it.
And in terms of fiction, it feels like it's my job to tell stories that would help to normalize people like me, you know, non-binary, hard of hearing, whatever narratives, because you just don't hear them. You know?
Yeah, got it. So it was embracing that,
right.
that responsibility and that opportunity.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, Kishonna, you've said, I'm sorry, Dolly, did I just cut you off? I feel like I stepped on you. Okay. You said something really interesting that I want to clarify. So first of all, I do want to note that there's a funny thing about the model minority myth, right? When you come to this country, particularly as an East Asian, you're kind of told to just slot in and be quiet and, do what you can do to not rock the boat, right? And that's really tricky, because I think for a long time, I genuinely believed with every cell of my being that I could be white, and so to be told by a major industry that I couldn't be white was like a real shocker. That was really kind of interesting to me. And then you mentioned, just quickly, because I'm going to forget, even though I wrote it down, you mentioned the living between two different dynamic generations, right? And I am thinking in particular, I grew up with the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Mm-hmm. And there's a reboot that's coming on that's called Bel-Air.
I was about to say that.
There's a reboot?
There's a reboot. There's a reboot.
But it's a drama.
It's a drama. Yeah.
Oh, gosh, I'm nervous.
Okay, so here's the thing that's really interesting about that, because you know what? The narrative is still the same. It is still Black kid from inner city Philadelphia comes to Bel-Air. We only ever thought of it as a comedy because it's Will, right? But it's the exact same narrative that makes it so dangerous for Will Smith to come as a Black kid, from Philadelphia, from inner city Philadelphia, to come to Bel-Air. That's dangerous, right?
Absolutely.
I never thought about it that way until 3 months ago, when I was like, oh yeah, this is a thing, right. So even just broadening that narrative, right? Or helping us to see that there are these two different sides to it is valuable, right?
Absolutely.
And that had to happen from one generation to the next, right? There is always the white person's rendition of what the Black comedy is, okay? And then there's the Black man's rendition of what the Black comedy is, right?
Absolutely. And I think, that's fascinating. When you think about narratives, I'm always big about, so it's one thing that we write and create these stories, but you also have to always think about the audience, who's receiving this on the other side. And I always thought, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was just that, that safe approach to okay, these Black people are in your neighborhood now. We're funny. We're going to entertain you. We're not going to rob you. We had to think about who's consuming that audience. So just this reframing, I didn't know that this was a thing. I didn't know that this was happening. So I really love the fact, the drama-ness of it, of hey, this is the reality of actually what it might mean to be a poor Black kid moving to Bel-Air. So that's fascinating. Mm-hmm. I wanted to, you had said something at the beginning, and I wanted to speak to. I had a question. I don't remember. Damn it. I'm so sorry. I'll remember, because it was a question back to the dynamic of, being pigeonholed that I can't remember. When I remember it,
I know what it was. Was it when she said she thought she could be white?
Yes.
I saw you react at that moment.
Yes. That's fascinating to me, right? Because that's a reality for us, right? Mm-hmm. And then I think that's also the dynamicness of white supremacy too, of selling you this dream and this allure of hey, you can be one of us, but then the okie doke of yeah, you're never gonna be one of us. We just wanted you just to go through that exercise and go through the hazing and go through the hurdles and hoops of you're never gonna be a cis heterosexual white able-bodied man. Gotcha,
Right, exactly.
Video game.
Right? Oh my gosh, that would be fascinating, right? Just you're going and you're attaining all these levels of achievement, moving up, to the American dream. And I'm just thinking about so many, I'm thinking about, I do a lot of work, and thinking about how we can bring different racialized communities together, right? And I focus a lot on Black and brown communities, Black and Asian communities, how we can dismantle the divides, in our communities often. And I think it's often, just this process that you describe of okay, there's this promise of being able to attain something, but realizing being in this marked body, you're never going to get it. And then there's then that's the moment of where we can do more collaboration and coming together, because I think a lot of it, also that desire to be white is also, especially in an American context, is also rooted in anti-Blackness. Because the opposite of that is you don't want to be associated, with this Blackness either, so that's why the status to attain, is whiteness. So there's a lot to unpack. We got to take classes to understand the dynamics of all that. But that's so. Thank you. For saying that, Ishan. That's really powerful.
So that leads us into the next question, which I think is a very important thing to talk about. How do we teach white, able, cis, hetero people to be aware that they're surrounded only by other white, cis, able, hetero people, and that they should want us in their company. They should seek us out. How do we teach that without sounding like we're begging?
I Dolly, I'm so sorry. You had a beautiful and I think you're going to say something really profound right now.
Yeah, I kind of plateaued there.
I love you, Dolly. I think first that exercise is futile. That's not where we need to be starting, right? I think that there first needs to be an acknowledgement. Like white folks have to like acknowledge their whiteness. Like privileged bodies got to acknowledge that. Able bodies have to acknowledge the ableism. You know, men have to acknowledge, you know, their role in like sexism and like patriarchy, you know? Like there's like really like this pathway of like folks have to do that internal exercise first, right? Because then what's going to happen is that a lot of these, especially when we think about, you know, like, you know, I'm thinking mostly about like, you know, white cis heterosexual men in particular, you know, they don't have like any kind of like roots in their identity. So when they're reading other stories, you know, they pick up and they attach themselves. That's why there's so much like cultural appropriation, you know, and that's why you have so many, you know, a lot of like white folks who have the caucasity to think that they can create Asian stories and immigrant narratives and immigrant stories because they're like, oh, I read enough about it. I know how to do this. And then they're also, but they're also doing it from a place where they have not done that reflection work and reflection piece to acknowledge, you know, who they are and what their role is in these stories that they're telling. I think that's why there's so much like riffing in the literary world of like, you know, white folks telling other people's stories, you know, because they haven't acknowledged their own identities yet.
Or that it even is an identity.
Yeah.
In and of itself. I like Kishonna's answer, so I'm going to +1 on that. But now I can't stop thinking about this video game that I'm designing in my head. But Courtney, the last time I played a video game was like maybe Pac-Man when it was actually a new game. So you and Kishonna are gonna I'm sure think this is ridiculous. But imagine actually, because there is, I think Tim Wise, who's a writer in this space, I think he's the one that came up with this metaphor about what's happening is we're all playing at different difficulty levels of a game, but we don't know it. And you can imagine actually a really powerful learning tool using all the power of gaming to create experiences that would allow people to see, to make visible some of these invisible forces, to step into identities that they don't normally hold, and to realize they are holding identities that they don't realize they hold, to create an experiential learning experience, which isn't just intellectually, I think I know what that is, I'm actually feeling it. Like I actually, and I think there's some like, you know, very low tech versions out there, which are kind of, you know, like the privilege game. There's some things floating around in sort of teaching and learning circles, but sitting here knowing the power of gaming, I wonder if that's a place where there's possibility.
Absolutely, yeah. And there have been a few. There's what is it called? Bury Me, My Love, I believe. Is about a Syrian refugee, I think. I could be mixing them up, but
This is a game, Courtney?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, there are a few that kind of tackle that, and even some of the bigger AAA games that are out. There have been some that tackle issues like Life is Strange 2, I know, talked about being Mexican American, I believe, and trying to navigate in the white world. And Red Dead Redemption 2, I thought did better than a lot of games in discussing what we did to Native Americans, what it was like to be a black man in 1899. You know, and they had some interesting. Wasn't the focus of the game, but it was kind of like a side story, and you got to see how some of these characters were treated.
That's amazing. And I can also imagine opportunity to create some of the joy factor to sort of build in because there's a lot of hardship that comes with having a marginalized identity, but there's also a lot of camaraderie and community and joy that I think those in the majority will never fully relate to. That feeling of being connected, you know, that what Kishonna was saying about like something about the roots of the identity. I wonder if there's a way to build that in. So that's my $1 million idea that I hereby to you.
So, Kishonna, when you talk about asking the wrong question, right? Like it being a zero-sum game or it being a non-starter, this idea of getting people to appreciate other populations. I'm wondering if that's just another way to say, like, okay, you're basically centering the wrong population, right? I mean, the idea isn't to make them feel better about us, as it were. It's to put us on an equal playing field, right? I mean, is that kind of accurate? Is that where we're getting at?
So I think for me, you know, it always seems like we are vying for the attention of white supremacist institutions, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to get them to accept us and love us, and you know, I guess I want to like decentralize that notion, right? You know, but I also like, you know, for instance, you know, I have a friend that's always like pushing back about like, you know, academics who are like, you know, the hustle that we do to like get tenure. Mm-hmm. And they're like, you know, why does that have to be like that piece that validates us, you know? Mm-hmm. And I get the last time we talked, I know you all talked about, you know, there are certain like bodies that are like the ones that we aspire to attain to. But what would it mean, you know, if we were to create our own and like, you know, have like our own, you all mentioned even having like our own publishing like outlets and like, mm-hmm. like we can do these things, you know, but why is that seen as like a lesser activity or like, you know, it has like lesser value? You know, I think that's the thing that we have to like interrogate, you know, with ourselves. You know, why are we fighting to be in these spaces that clearly don't want us? Why are we fighting to have our stories so when clearly they don't care? You know, I think that's part of the thing that's the conversation that we then need to have like internally, you know? And so I guess like, you know, and I get the need and I get the, you know, that compelling need to want to say, hey, I made it to whatever list. I'm there. I was accepted. I got this award. I got, you know, those are like, that's like the template for success. But then we have to think like who created that template? And, you know, maybe there will be a point where, you know, we are enough on our own, you know, where like, you know, the BET awards will be enough. We don't have to have an Emmy or an Oscar or, you know, like whatever it is, you know, I don't know. That's just my question. I don't have an answer for that. Yeah. But, you know, I just think that that's an important thing that we also have to interrogate internally with ourselves.
Well, and it's a really interesting question when you put it side by side with where our conversation began about embracing the identity and the responsibility / opportunity to humanize others through your work, which in some ways requires you to go through the gatekeepers, even if you don't endorse that they should be the gatekeepers or that there should even be gates or that there's anything that we should be seeking behind that gate. But if behind the gate is where the opportunity for humanization lies, and nuance and narrative and de-stereotyping, I think it's really interesting to put those two questions side by side and hold both of them to be true.
Yeah, I mean, I know I'm deeply resentful of the fact that there are these potential silos, you know, the fact that we have to build our own space, right? And in fact, Dolly and you and I really connected because of an argument I was having on Twitter, which is an embarrassing thing that should never, ever, ever happen.
Oh yeah.
But do you remember that? So we actually connected because
are you not going to tell us the argument? You're just
I'm going to tell you. No, I'm going to tell you. It wasn't between us. It was like basically Dolly had written this really amazing article for the New York Times about being part of this no group, right? You know, where it's like you have a group of women who will bolster you when you have to say no to something, right? I mean, they basically just, you call each other and they say, nope, don't do that, right? Okay, so, and that's a really great thing. But somebody else seized on it who also works in the field of women first, I want to say, right? She's very big on the lean in.
Embarrassed, I don't remember who it was, but
I think I blocked it out.
Don't say who it was.
So essentially what happened was she jumped into Dolly's piece and said, whatever, you know, you build a space of your own, right? You know, do this thing and do it now. And she was advocating like the lean out version of lean in, right? You know, sort of thing. And I said, well, that's really nice, but you're assuming that we all have the resources to build our own spaces. I don't have bricks and mortar for that. I don't have those resources. Like, and a lot of people don't have those resources, right? Like, I mean, a lot of people don't have that accessibility to the spaces that we're talking about. They don't have connections like we've got here. This is a powerhouse right here, you know, but they don't have that. So how do we equalize the opportunity to build your own spaces? That's the thing that always kind of makes me, how do we get from the possibility of to actual building the brick and mortar that allows us to have those spaces? Right. That's kind of where I get stuck.
And I guess, like, for me, then the question that I would then ask would be like, you know, how are we measuring our success then? Like, is our success, like, are we ultimately trying to get like a New York Times bestseller? And so we have to do certain things to like reach that and attain that spot? Or, you know, just the matter of like writing our words on a page and just being like doing that, like is just doing like that thing like for us, or is publishing the measure of success? So I think that's like the question that we have to then ask too. How are we even like measuring success? Because we could easily, you know, I could pay, I don't know how much it is to like self-publish, and then you've got like a book, but is that the measure of success? Or do we need the reviews, and do we need the awards, and do we need like the critical acclaim? So then we have to just like start to like ask like the question, you know, what is, so success is basically like the measure that white supremacist institutions have defined for us is like success. And that's fine. I mean, because I'm attaining to strive those things as well, you know? So but I think we just have to be like honest with ourselves and like saying, this is what I'm trying to do. Because, and most of the thing that drives me is that people told me that I couldn't. So now I want to show them that I can, you know, that's like the thing. Like you told me that, you know, nobody would care about Black gamers. Yeah, well, fuck you. Yeah, they do. I'm gonna make them care, you know? So that's why I want to do it. So that's why, you know, I have to like tell my friends, well, I'm like, this is why like I'm attaining, you know, to get tenure, you know, because Black girls don't get tenure. That's not a thing, you know, and so there are some things that then I want to prove, but I also have to remember, like, at the end of all these, like all the metrics, things that I've defined as like success, I'm like, okay, well, who am I then at the end of that? What am I going to do when I've attained like all those kinds of things, right? Then is that when the internal thing starts building? Okay, let me lift other people up and bring them up, but am I bringing them up through the awful structures that I came up through? Because it's killing us too, you know, like these systems like will kill us as well. So I think, you know, that's just like, you know, I don't have answers, you know, it's not perfect, but at least I'm honest about like the things that I'm doing. I want to be like the best-selling author for LSU Press. I want everybody to buy my book. Like I'm aware of like the contradictions that, you know, I reside in, you know, and I think that that's where we have to, you know, be honest too about with ourselves and with each other as well. Yeah.
Well, so when I look at something like Can I Play That, right? And I think this is also, this is part of being the change from the inside, right? Which is what I always told myself when my parents said, just assimilate. I would always say to myself, well, I'm going to burn it down from the inside. That's what I'm going to do. You know? But you know, when I look at something like Can I Play That, what I'm thinking about is ultimate success from my point of view would be if we were able to get everybody who is able-bodied to, you know, take a look at that website and be like, hey, this is a thing, you know, this is a thing that people are paying attention to, right? I want them all to pick up copies of Intersectional Tech and say, oh, I never knew this existed. This is a thing that I have to, you know, I have to educate myself on so that I can be a better, well-rounded human being and not just live in my white, abled, cis, het world, right? So I think for me, it's my measurement of success when I look at outliers, when I look at marginalized population, is to have all of the majority world look at that, you know, have the centralized world look at that and say, oh, this is a thing I never thought about before, right?
Yeah.
And by that measure, we're doing that. We're absolutely succeeding and doing that. Yeah.
And I think this question of why you're doing it is more complicated and more impactful than I think I realized when I set out to write a book, because I got asked that question by, you know, editors and agents and publicists, and why are you writing this book? And I was sort of like, I mean, I don't know, because I want to write a book. I want people to see my book. Like, I didn't realize there actually are really different reasons to write a book. And the answer to your question will have a very direct impact on the step A through Z that you go down, and everything from like who you even try to publish with, how you write that book, the level of crafting you do of the book, a number of revisions you go through with the book, even the amount of proofreading you do of the book, like your tolerance, the quality, the cover, like everything sits on the question of why are you writing this book? Are you writing this book because you have stuff that needs to come out of you? And what happens after it comes out of you, you're agnostic. That's one reason to write a book. It just needs to come out of you. But another reason to write a book is you feel strongly that people need to read these words. These words need to be read and felt and lived in other people's hearts and minds. Well, then that suggests a whole other set of steps, and then maybe you have to tolerate some gatekeepers, or maybe there's a very specific audience. Or another reason might be this book is a calling card to something else you care about. You want to do a lot of speaking, let's say, or you want to establish yourself as an expert, let's say. Every one of those whys puts you down a different path. I didn't realize that. And I don't know if everyone can articulate it at the beginning, but I think once you get into it, it starts to emerge. As writers, do you feel like you know why you want to write what you write?
Not always.
Yeah, fiction is funny. Fiction is like, so years ago, literally decades ago in 1996, I met a guy on a New York City subway train who was wearing this like beautiful 3-piece linen suit. And he was like the epitome of 90s hipness, right? He had like curly hair that kind of like stopped to here, beautiful suit, wire brim glasses, and he was reading the paper. It was like 10 at night. And then he crossed his legs and he was wearing red socks. And it was so compelling to me that I went over to him and I said, I never do this, but I'm really curious. What do you do for a living? And he told me he was a cartographer. He drew maps for a living. So dying to write that guy into a story. And I haven't been able to do it for, where are we now? We're 2020. So it's 15 years I've been working on this guy and I haven't been able to figure out, no, more than that, 25 years I've been working on this guy. And it's sometimes with fiction, it's like you're kind of, messing around in the ether, but with nonfiction, right? I mean, I think it's pretty cut and dry, right? I want to do this and I want to reach these people. So for me,
I don't know that that's so cut and dry with nonfiction, actually. I think there are a lot of different reasons people write nonfiction. Courtney, what were you going to say?
I don't remember.
Sorry for the cold call. The teacher in me can't help it. You can edit that out, Courtney.
You were talking about we were talking about whether or not we write with a reason in mind.
Oh, yeah. It does depend from genre to genre. Like if I'm writing nonfiction, it's because I have a point to prove. Like, Can I Play That was born from spite. Everything I write is based out of spite. So, but with fiction, it's always more of I really want to tell the story and I hope people like it as much as I do, and that gets back to why it's so much harder for me to query fiction, because when people don't love it as much as you, it hurts your feelings. Whereas if people don't understand your nonfiction, it's easier to be like, well, fuck you. I'll show you why it's important. So now there's Can I Play That? And I showed them why it's important. So
yeah, those amazing stats that you posted, I think, on Twitter. That was amazing.
I think.
Speaking of Can I Play That? Our next question. As soon as this very loud truck goes by. Okay. And I know you just discussed ableism in your newsletter last weekend, which was a brilliant newsletter.
Thank you for your help. It was extraordinary to be coached and mentored and generously given your time to review drafts of that.
My pleasure. Where's the question? There it is. So yeah, a thing that a lot of disabled people deal with is the infantilization of a disabled body. How do we get past that and seeing everything a disabled person does as inspiring, or, oh, if you can do it, I can? I don't think people ever realize how minimizing that is. Like, I did it because I need to go to the grocery store. So it's not special. I'm just shopping. Like, so how do we move people past seeing disabled people in that way? Do you think it's as simple as connect with some disabled people on Twitter? Because that's, I mean, now in the pandemic, we're seeing just how easy it is to meet people outside of your usual bubble, you know, because you can take to Twitter, take to a Zoom discussion that you happen,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Do you think it's that easy? It's just suggesting, okay, we'll meet some new people, get to know some disabled people, and you'll see that we're really, I hate saying this, but we're just like you.
You're
you
just
know?
as boring as the rest of us.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, I think that is part of this, honestly. I will share with you, the newsletter came out 48 hours ago, or no, what, around Wednesday, like 72 hours ago. And I've gotten more responses, like when people actually take the time to hit reply and send you a note to that newsletter than any of the prior ones, which tended to be more on the issues I usually write about of race and gender. So just for context, for those listening who don't know what I'm talking about, you know, I am very newly aware of what an ableist I am, and this is this was the seed of this was Courtney, and Courtney taking the time after reading my book. She sent me a note, which led me to follow Courtney's Twitter feed and discover all sorts of perspectives I was not tuned into at all, and couldn't be more embarrassed at how untuned in I was. And then that's led to following more people on Twitter. So Twitter remains, and I've said this for at least a decade, the most powerful force for personal and professional development I have in my life. And at some point, I'm going to write a newsletter on that. And one thing I've seen in the responses I've gotten from people is some of the people are writing because they have a disability. And by the way, in some of them I didn't know had a disability. These are people I know who I didn't know had a disability. Or someone in their life does, and so this is an issue that they've been more aware of than me. And what they've been saying in these, and then to finish that thought, and then some people are writing because they, like me, had never ever thought about these issues before, and are sort of swept up in this ignorance that they didn't know they were carrying. And what I'm seeing in the notes is a genuine interest, and I'm seeing it in the clicks in the newsletter as well. Courtney, again, we're seeing lots of clicks on you and your site within the newsletter. So I do think there's something maybe about this moment that's the right moment, that you know, it's not going to be everybody, but maybe it's going to be a tipping point of us will get on board. And by the way, a colleague of mine who's a professor at another university who read my newsletter texted me this morning. She was in the middle of teaching a class where students were doing presentations, and a student presented as part of her presentation a video of a disabled person. It was like inspiration porn. And my friend texted me and said, I read your newsletter and I don't know what to do. This is happening right now in class. Text me back. What do I do? And you know, on the spot, what we decided she would do is when the presentation was over, she wasn't going to shame the student in front of everybody, but she was going to say, wow, that reminded me of something really interesting I read recently. I'm going to make sure I share it with everybody. And that she would build in, as the curriculum went on, semester went on, like more, you know, without focusing on that one student, because certainly that student wouldn't have been alone in this. Would sort of build it into the teaching plan. So I think there's an openness there. Getting to know you, Courtney, has been a start of that for me. Like it's not just the content that you write or your websites. It's also, I mean, you put a lot of yourself out there on social media, far more than I do. And so I always admire people willing to do that. I am not willing to do that. But it humanizes you in a way. I don't know that that's why you do that, but it has had that effect on me.
I don't know if I have like a general opinion on like the effectiveness of it, right? So I think it's good. You know, like the more the more that we consume other people's stories and narratives, yes, I guess it does lead to some humanizing of them, right? But I guess I also like see the limits of it, especially whenever I think about people who do this, like this contact approach to like empathy, right? Of like, okay, let's just put like, like a Black person with this racist, and the contact will help them be less racist, right? What happens is that that person then falls in love with that person that they're with. And it doesn't translate to like the larger community. They're like, well, you're one of the good ones, but there are still those awful ones out there, like, and I guess I do see some limits. So I think for instance, Dolly, you have a particular personality type where you want to be better and to do better. And so when people are helping you, like all of us, like we get better by, like I've gotten better because of the work, that Courtney and them have done, and so but there are some people who just resist that. And I think that that's like where some of the struggles still exist and reside, because I feel like, all of us, we would have been better anyway, because we want to be better human beings, like for everybody else, right? So, the contact that we have, just kind of like, like supports that. But there are some people, y'all don't like the people in the world that it doesn't matter how much contact they have, they're still like resistant to that. And I don't know, what do we do with those populations? Is them playing a video game, will that do it? Or, if they see like more stories, like on, New York Times front page, like, will that do it? Like, how do we reach those people? Do we want to reach those people?
Right. Well, I mean, so now researcher Dolly's kind of bubbling to the surface here. So 3 research points on that. One is that, the research on interracial contact suggests that your intuition about people being subtyped, they become like the good one and the stereotype, we psychologists call it subtyping, that occurs, and even that might not occur unless there's interdependence between the parties. So contact alone will simply allow for conventional power dynamics to take over unless there's like interdependence between the two, and then you might get the subtyping. So all the risks you outlined, the experimental data and the field data would support it. But the third research point I would make is, how do we get them there? What my thesis is that we have to get people out of this fixed mindset where they view themselves as either I'm a good person or I'm not, and people are always going to insist that they're a good person, even some people in office, and the continuum we want to move people to is what Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset, where we view ourselves as a work in progress, and as a work in progress, we're not sort of retreating in shame. We're actually, like, our brains, what this brain study shows, we actually show more activation when we encounter stuff that's unfamiliar or new or reveals our own mistakes. And I appreciate the kind words you said, but I feel like I'm constantly toggling between these fixed mindset and growth mindsets. And the difference between me and maybe some is, the only difference is that I am actively trying to push myself back to growth mindset. Like, I have to continuously do it, because you have to continuously brush your teeth every day. You don't get to do it once and call it a month. It's the same thing with a growth mindset. So I think that's where the work is nudging people in that direction.
I love the example that you have, the analogy of like brushing like your teeth, right? Because we learn how to develop like those dental hygiene practices early in life, right? So is this like a matter of, and the reason I say that I love that dental hygiene like example is because, my children were introduced to like growth mindset, right? They were introduced to it like in their school, last year, in first grade, my oldest was, I can't remember what age they were in, but they were in Oak Park and they were introduced to this, and I thought it was beautiful. It was fascinating. Now they're in a different school district now, and at the 4th grade level, that's where they're introducing kids to like this idea of like growth mindset. So I guess, like, is there a time where people need to be introduced to this? Or is there like a point of no return? Like, if you didn't get it by this age or this developmental milestone, like
No.
can I go and introduce this concept to people that vote for Donald Trump.
Yes.
Well, I'm gonna just say it.
Wow, I was like agreeing until you got to the last. I take back my agreement. I hereby retract my optimism.
But does it make sense? Like what I'm saying, like when do we introduce folks like to this?
Yeah. So let me drop a little more research. So growth mindset and fixed mindset are domain specific typically. I mean, there's some like personality version of it, but what I'm talking about here is specific to like, you might have a growth mindset about writing, like you always view yourself as a writer who's getting better and better no matter how good you are. And you might have a fixed mindset about gardening. You might just have decided like, I don't have a green thumb, I'm never gonna have a green thumb. And you might have a fixed mindset about gaming. You might be a great gamer and have decided that you're a great gamer with nothing to learn from anyone else. And that's also a fixed mindset. So all of us are a portfolio of these mindsets, and they're actually surprisingly easy to activate. That's what the research shows, is really actually not that hard to just say to yourself, okay, this is something that can be improved on. That coaching feedback will actually make me better at this thing. So it is definitely something that lifelong, and it's not set at a particular time or in a particular domain. At all.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things as well is that, Dolly, you've just said that you toggle between growth and fixed all the time, right? And even within domains, you can toggle between
Yes.
growth and fixed on a daily basis, right? I mean,
Yes.
we've all had those days where it's like, oh, I'm crap at this. I'm crap at everything. I can't do this. And you just lie on the floor and do nothing, right? And that's okay. But then you have to reassert that growth mindset and you have to pull it back, right?
Yes.
But the other thing that that I was triggered about when you all were talking, not triggered in a bad way, but in a good way. I talked before about centering, right? And one of the things that came up as Dolly, you were talking about your friend who texted you and was like, what do I do about the student, right now? There's a line in your book where you talk about, centering yourself or centering the population that really needs to be centered, right? And I think this is one of those things, right? Like the question you ask in your book is who's getting the ego boost when you do the good thing, right? If you have a photo of a disabled person who's doing some inspirational thing, right, and you're the one who's getting the ego boost from it, then maybe you're not looking at it the right way. Maybe you should be looking at the person who's doing those difficult things and considering them by themselves, not in comparison to you, right? So, I mean, I kind of feel like that's another way of looking at it, right? This idea of who actually feels good when you do something like posting a photograph of somebody who you actually believe is worse off than you are.
Right.
Oh, if this poor person can do this, then surely I can do this. And actually, I did it the other day when Chadwick Boseman died. And I think I said something like, I'm feeling really down and really miserable. And then I remember that Chadwick Boseman did all these things while he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, right? And then I think I was on Courtney's Facebook page, which is ceaselessly entertaining.
Sorry, I just become a professional social media person.
No, seriously,
you already have like 3 jobs, but
right, exactly. I just remember something she posted that just made me crack up. But in any case, and there was something on there about how there are so many people who are leveraging the pain of what Boseman went through in order to be able to boost themselves, and I had to really take a hard look at myself, right? Like, did I say this because it's like, Boseman had cancer and he could do all these terrible things. Surely I can get up and do this. Like, it's, it's not okay for that to be the first thing to come to my mind, right? There can be other ways for me to motivate myself, as opposed to leveraging off of somebody else's terrible situations and terrible pain,
Yes, and I mean, I'm exactly in that boat as well. The thing I wonder though is if we were better at accessibility, would it be bad to be posting things like that? Would it still be wrong? Is it because we've objectified it, the experience, without understanding it, without accommodating it, without creating barriers for the person? Is that what makes it wrong, or is it just in and of itself, no matter what, wrong?
And is that what we're doing with the black experience now? You know, when we think about the 400 years of terribleness, right? I mean, are we also now, what is the word I'm looking for? You know, putting on a pedestal, right? The black experience, or holding it up as a, what's the word I'm looking for, you
like
guys?
Performative, something performative?
No, you know, I guess I'm talking.
Objectifying?
Yeah.
Essentializing, maybe essentializing.
Maybe essentializing.
Maybe.
I'll find the word at some point. But yeah, I mean, are we holding up those experiences as being, I don't know, you know, making them icons in some way, shape, or form, or
like neutering the experience.
Pathologizing. Yeah, maybe. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that could be it too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Interesting.
You know, I think, to touch on what you asked, Dolly, I think if we were better about accessibility, we wouldn't have othered those people, so we wouldn't be in a position to see that as something so powerful, like the person going to the grocery store. You know, it's a difficult thing because the store itself, because the way we've designed the store isn't accessible.
Oh, got it.
So they,
right.
You know, the disabled person is then, you know, beholden to asking for help, asking for access. So I think if we were to take that away and level everything, if it was accessible, there wouldn't really be the opportunity to do that.
That's really interesting. By the way, Courtney, I don't think I've told you this. So one of the things I learned from you is that I shouldn't assume that people are going to disclose, proactively disclose, even if there's like formal channels for accommodations. And you've shared stories of when you've experiences you've had with universities, and I work at a university. So I asked, like in a background survey that I send out at the beginning of the semester, I proactively asked questions along these lines. And sure enough, I've heard from 3 students who have some form of disability that I would not have been made aware of, was it not for that. So not that you didn't know that was going to happen, but it was very reinforcing for me to realize how important it was to do that. And I fully realize that there's other students who very well may not have disclosed, even though I asked, for very good reasons.
All right, next question. Skip one. What does the diversity science say about the benefits of diverse thought?
Go ahead.
Go. You go.
No. I'm not versed on that, but I know how people like weaponize it. So think about, you know, how like, you know, when we have like calls for like diversity, and then people are all of a sudden saying, oh, well, there are so many ways to be diverse. And, you know, these scholars have diverse scholarship, and let's bring them all to this panel. And they all end up being white dudes, you know, like, I think that there is like the weaponizing effect, because sometimes we've made that definition of diversity too broad to placate to the sensibilities of white masculine anxieties, you know? And I think that's we've done that to a detriment, you know, like where we're not spending like enough, you know, significant time just focusing on particular populations and like doing the things that we need to do to either make space for other folks, if we want to think numerically about people, you know, in spaces, or if we want to think about like people's experiences. And I think, you know, maybe, and again, like I'm not versed in diversity like scholarship, but I'm also thinking about like, you know, that literature also has limits to it, you know, because they a lot, you know, from what I read, you know, they're really talking about, you know, just having the present, getting people access to a space, and just like their presence alone, like is where a lot of people like stop with that, you know. And I think that, and again, I'll let somebody else speak, you know, because that, you know, that's not my area, so I don't want to speak to it, but I'm just thinking about like in a university like context, you know, their focus is on like recruiting students of color, right? Without thinking about like, okay, how do we retain them? You know, that retention part is more than just making sure they've got money for a scholarship. So that's where like there's that limit where access is just like the limits of that conversation. I'm like, you know, well, what are their experiences in the residential dorms? You know, what are their experiences, you know, with other students, like, you know, on campus? Is there space for them on campus? You know, do they? So I think, you know, we have to, when we recognize the limits, then we can start working to like accommodate and make sure that we are addressing like the other needs that diversity doesn't give us.
Absolutely. And what there's a amazing scholarship on this topic from Kathy Phillips, who unfortunately passed away earlier this year and was a legend in my field, really at a very young age. She was younger than me when she passed. So what I'm sharing is her work. What Kathy's work shows is that diversity, if we look at the relationship between, let's say, diversity and group performance in a workplace, let's say, there's actually a negative relationship between adding diversity and work performance unless you do what Kishonna just said, which is deliberately create the inclusive behaviors that are going to help the team work well together. And then you actually see a bump on performance, that you're better off with a diverse team than not with a diverse team. So to make that really tangible, let's say you have a meeting, and in that meeting, you have managed to create a diverse group by the definition we used in our last conversation, which diverse doesn't mean you have a room full of Black people, for example. That would be a not diverse group if race was the measure. A diverse group would mean you have Black, you have white, you have East Asian, you have South Asian, whatever. And so that in that diverse group, information exchange is a primary function of a meeting. The point of everybody being in the shared space is that we've each got something to contribute to this, and if we are all contributing and building off each other and pressing each other and coming out to a deeper understanding, we supposedly will perform better. So information exchange, when it actually is happening, because we're not shutting people down, we're not dismissing people, we're not misinterpreting their nonverbals to be angry, when we're behaving in inclusive ways and the information is exchanged, then performance goes up. So that's one example of there's more information to be exchanged if you have a diverse group. However, if you don't create inclusive environments, then the information doesn't get exchanged, and in fact you lose out on information, and then you actually see dampened performance. So it's this some people say, oh, the business case for diversity, which is like a phrase in business schools. And there is a business case for diversity, but it's not as simple as put everybody in the same room, even if we don't create the sort of overly broadened definition of diversity that Kishonna was talking about.
Yeah, I think another way to look at it too is touching on what Dolly just said about creating that atmosphere for inclusion. I'm thinking about Francesca Gino, who wrote a book called Rebel Talent, and she went to visit this Michelin-starred restaurant. And the chef there, the owner of the restaurant, what he does is he encourages everybody to bring all of their backgrounds into the kitchen. So what he'll do is he'll have theme nights for his kitchen where he'll make all the chefs and the sous chefs, bring in a dish from their own background. Right. And they'll all cook for each other and they'll learn from those dishes. And then he did one night where he put on a piece of music and he made everybody cook a dish according to what their interpretation of that piece of music was. Right. The idea being that you can actually tell a lot about somebody from their extracurriculars, right? And just this idea of being able to bring what you love to your workplace creates that sense of inclusivity, thereby creating the conversation that you need to have in order to be able to have a successful meeting, right? So, it's again, we're right back around to stories, aren't we? Right? What are the stories you tell about yourself, and do you feel comfortable telling them to your work group, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's really interesting. It also, in some ways there's a parallel here for accessibility and like whether or not people are disclosing a disability. Whether or not I'm going to disclose my extracurriculars depends on how much backlash I fear for if I don't have the same extracurriculars as others, or if I'm going to be judged for what you do. What you needlepoint, or whatever, for not having the same interests as others. So it all comes down to growth mindset.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask the question, like, how does then the literary world think about and define diversity? Is diversity just in the content, or is diversity like in their authors, or is diversity like in their inside like their institutions? Like, do they get like training? Like, for instance, like a lot of like entities and organizations have like, diversity trainings, implicit bias trainings. Like, does that happen in the literary world?
I do know that at a good number of the big five and their imprints, there are people who are working to make that happen. And having something like the baseline survey, which we'll put in the show notes, that was spearheaded by a company called Lee and Low, which is a publisher of children's books. So and initially it started out as a baseline study of what's happening in children's publishing, because, as you pointed out, it's never too young to start talking about things like inclusion and diversity, right? But it expanded, to include a lot more. So kind of pointing at things, right, and saying this is a problem, we need to make that happen. But in terms of your actual question, which is whether or not it's they're taking it seriously, or what they mean by diversity and inclusion, I think this is a thing that they're still struggling with. And I know in the literary world too, in the literary magazine world, for instance, which is what I used to work in, there is still a sense of wanting to do good that is up against the belief that we already are doing good by promoting voices that may or may not be marginalized, or may or not be centered. So I think there is still some resistance to that. There is a lot of slowness around that sense, right? This lack of urgency, I think, that comes from when you are working in an environment that is comfortable for you, right? So there's some of that.
Yes, and I also think right now there's fear and insecurity on these issues, and so there is everything that fear and insecurity brings. There's some like frenzy of trying to figure stuff out. There's some like unlearning and relearning. There's some, close your eyes. But I keep getting calls, so I think they are trying to figure stuff out.
I think. Go ahead.
I was going to ask Kishonna whether or not she sees any of that in academic publishing. I mean, it's a huge problem in academic publishing, right? I mean, all the way down to who reviews your papers, to go when you're talking about peer-reviewed journals, right? That's a huge issue.
Yeah, and that's why we get so many like racist articles out there, because you have people who don't have like the context or the knowledge like to be able to like review some of this stuff. There was actually there was a bit of a kerfuffle on Twitter just a few weeks ago. I believe there was an author with the last name Mead from NYU, actually, and I think he published something that was like, kind of like racist. Hope if we could drop that into the show notes, just so people have like context, for that conversation. But then we have to like think that, and then there's a lot of like sexist material. There are some highly regarded like professors at MIT, for instance, that have chimed in like on conversations around like gender identity, and they're TERFs, and they don't, and then these people get published around these topics, and then when we call them out, then we're the bullies, we're the bad guys, right? Then we're engaging in like those like they call us like the toxic actors, because we don't allow for like a freedom of thought. And I'm like, well, your thoughts are wrong, like the thoughts are racist and they're ableist and sexist and homophobic, and then they're just wrong. But there's also like that other side. So if for people who don't know about like academic publishing, a lot of it requires a labor of other academics, right? So the peer review process, I review books, I review articles. We have to do like that labor and say, okay, yes, I'll engage to review this and offer suggestions like for change, and offer like suggestions like to improve like this piece or whatever. So people have to like sign up to do that work. So, but to think about like folks who are already tapped out from all the labor and things. So I can't accept everything that comes my way, and it's only so many of us. It's only so many, folks who have, who identify as like people of color, or, people who are like women of color, or people who have, who are disabled, or, who want to like speak to a lot of these things. And then, but a lot of that work, even you may have that identity, but that may not be like your area of research and focus, so you have like a lot of problematic people, who, as it Columbusing? Is that the word? I don't know what it is, but basically like, people who are like in these areas, you know, and I don't want to say they shouldn't be in those areas, but they're coming at it from like a particular perspective, right? I mean, even thinking about it in the medical field, there's so much like, you know, eugenics that's still being like, you know, published, and so much like medical racism that's still being like published and put out there, you know? We just haven't had like the critical mass of like folks who are, you know, from other younger generations who can come and flood that out maybe, like, you know, and I also don't think that I hate that people also think that there's like this First Amendment protections to like academic speech. That's just not reality. You know, there are some things that are wrong, but I think there are struggles to like challenge like a lot of that. I know I'm talking like probably like in circles, because I have a lot of energy. I'm angry a lot because, you know, it's these folks who are getting published, and in my work, they call it me search. So they don't see that as valuable. You know, they're like, well, no, you're writing about, you know, populations that look like you. This is not rigorous enough. You know, there's no, the validity here is wrong. You can't generalize about your own, you know, and I'm like, yeah. So there's a lot of problems in academic publishing.
There is so much to react to there. I believe I'm already angry enough, so I'm not gonna assume too much more today. But you know, there is this, what you brought up, this idea of people who are already tapped out, right? There's a lot of labor, a lot of volunteer labor that goes on in the literary world as well, right? So a lot of these literary magazines you see who are at the forefront of gatekeeping are operating on volunteer work, you know, and that is a problem because it keeps literary publishing in the realm of the privileged. Who has time to volunteer for a literary magazine? You know, it's the people who have time and who have money and who have resources, and that keeps it in a certain strata of privilege, of advantage, you know, and that's a real problem. Not to mention, I was talking to somebody, I don't know, like months ago now, and, you know, I was complaining as usual about the volunteer factor of literary magazines. And he said, yeah, the other thing that makes me think of is that when you talk about editing, this hardcore skill as being a labor of love or a labor of passion, it feminizes it, you know, and that therefore pushes it into another bracket and reinforces the sense of like, oh, female labor shouldn't be paid. You know, I mean, it's infuriating, right? So it's just this problem of this unpaid labor that goes around and around and around and creates these potential issues that go on and on and on and on, right? So, Courtney, you were going to say something, and I keep on railroading you. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to touch on the fear aspect of it that Dolly had mentioned. We at Can I Play That? We recently put out a call. We finally got to a place where we can pay for one submission a month. And because, as you said, we're an all-volunteer organization, so the people that have the time and money and resources to volunteer ended up being a staff of white people. So we are, the staff of Can I Play That is white. And because of that, we wanted to make sure that our first paid pieces were from people of color. The reaction to that was absolutely what I expected. There was the people that were feigning concern. Well, you're excluding white people now, and yes, by design. That was the point. Well, isn't that kind of racist? No, it's not. Next, and then there was the anger, which I'm sure you all experienced, the anger of, well, what about me? I have a story to tell too. Yeah, and there are umpteen places that you can tell it too. Go to one of them. But the fear is weird because it's like a fear of you're not the center of attention anymore. What's going to happen when everybody realizes that, oh shit, white people are not the center of attention anymore? How do we cope with that? And that is, in my experience, where a lot of the fear comes from. So it's weird to address because I don't think there are many white people that realize that a lot of the reaction comes from how used to being the center of attention, used to being normal we are, you know. And that leads me to the question that we can wrap up with. And I'm going to rephrase this because I don't like the way that I originally phrased it. So, okay, the four of us and other people like us, we have all been in the trenches dealing with all the crap that comes with the work we do. We're used to being targets of hate or bullying or whatever. How do we help people new to the field, younger people, people that are trying to learn the things we do? How do we help bolster them to put up with what we have put up with?
That's a beautiful question, a fantastic question, Courtney. Thank you for asking that. I think one of the things that people have to do, and I said this somewhere before, I can't remember what the context was, but people have to like understand that we're on a moving train, right? It's not going to stop for you to catch up. So there's like some work that folks might need to do to like catch up and see what's being done and see who has, you know, contributed like to whatever conversation, see who the folks who have organized around, you know, diversity in the literary world, or, you know, say, you know, identify the people who have like, you know, created entities, you know, like can I play that? I need diverse games. Like there's like some work that, you know, folks need to do to like to catch up, right? Because I think one of the things that I pushed back. I was doing a podcast with this white man, a lovely white man, and you know he was like saying all these kinds of things, but he was like at the starting line, you know, and I'm like, well, so many people have already done so much of this work before. Like you need to go and catch up.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was like, well, where should I start? And I was like, see, you're losing already because it's not on me to do that. You've got Google. You found me. You can find other folks and other things, you know, but, and I think, you know, there is like a genuine concern. Well, some folks are like scared because they don't want to mess up. Right. And so they're like, well, you tell me, because if a black woman said that I can do A, B, C, and D and be okay, then I'm okay. Right. I was like, well, you're losing already. We're losing again, you know, because you have to accept the fact that you're going to mess up. There are going to be missteps and you have to be okay with that. So I think that there's like a lot of fear, especially from, you know, our privileged counterparts, our privilege, you know, people who we want to, you know, mobilize to be allies and comrades and accomplices, whatever name we're using like this week, you know. I think that, you know, they, you know, these folks have to like recognize that they won't always do the right thing all the time, and that's okay. I don't know if that was your question, but that was the thing that I felt compelled to say at that moment, Courtney. And I'm sorry if I didn't answer the question.
I think it's totally related, Kishonna. I really do. And I love what you said about messing up all the time, because those of us who are marginalized, we have messed up in the white man's world all of our lives, all of our lives, you know? So and we're continuing to mess up, right? And because we have been living in this world of racist and systemic problems, you know, all of our lives. And as it's changing, we're going to have to clear some of the cultural smog, you know, to borrow a phrase from Dolly's book, right? The idea that there's all this stuff that's around us that we're having to learn and relearn and you know, wipe away and start all over again. So like, even though you're Black and I'm Asian and, you know, and Courtney's disabled, like we're in this continuum of consistently learning, right? And so if we can make room to make mistakes, which is something I do every single day, right? Make mistakes, then we can move forward, right? Because you can't actually move forward without those mistakes. But Courtney, your question was about bolstering people and, you know, people who are new to this field to put up with what we've been putting up with. And I always remember something that a writer named Michelson Knapp taught me. He said that he takes joy in the successes of others. And I think it's so important to lift those voices that we see doing things that we admire, consistently recognizing their successes and taking on their successes as money in my bank, you know, that I can spend and feel good about, right? Because if those voices are making it to me, then something is going right. Yeah. And I'm not just talking about, you know, voices in the, you know, the Taiwanese American women's writers group that I'm currently populating, whatever, right? I'm talking about people whose voices I have not heard before, who I will continue to seek out and read, from populations that I'm not as familiar with, points of view that I don't quite understand yet and that I want to get to know more. Like those are the voices that I'll continue to elevate and take joy in and spread around. And it's the only way that sometimes I can lift myself out of deep funks, is to, look at who's gone before and who continues to come in my, in my current landscape.
Yeah. And I'll add that what we talked about earlier when Kishonna was talking about these like generational differences between the respectability politics, Black power, the respectability politics, code shifting, and so on, that we can think about that through the framework of heat and light. Heat being where we're pressing for change and we're creating discomfort by design, and not centering the dominant experience, and light being meeting people where they are, creating comfort and learning, and centering the dominant experience. So slower, more incremental change. And folks, historians who study social movements, what they have found is that when there's both heat and light at the same time, those movements make more progress than when they're primarily heat or primarily light. And I think that's a great framework for thinking about those who are coming into this work and how they think about us and how we think about them, is to not sabotage each other. So if heat's, if I've been all light, I can't even throw shade on social media, let alone in real life. And so I've got, that light-based approach, but I need to, and this is something I've been working on, not discredit those willing to bring the heat, those willing to really get in there, because we need them and they're doing something that I don't naturally do, and vice versa. Those who are bringing the heat need to realize they need me as well. So I think that's knowing that there's not just room for both of us, there's a need for both of us is really useful.
Yeah. Awesome. So wanted to wrap up with our goals for inclusion and accessibility in our industries. And I think we can each touch on what's most important for us to keep in mind as we move forward. For me, it is continuing to create spaces for people that want to do the kind of work that we're doing, want to do the kind of work that I'm doing. I would love to make Can I Play That for everything I want to be a part of, but I don't have all the energy in the world, so but I want to continue to educate, and for me the purpose of this talk was to bring some of the things that I have been dealing with, the roadblocks for me in moving from games writing into general fiction and nonfiction writing, and discuss them with all of you brilliant people to get your input on them, and kind of give not a guide really, but like a state of things for marginalized people trying to work in this industry, to people already in the industry, so that they can know what they can help with, what they need to do, what they can change, how they can help us. That was my goal, and that is my goal moving forward with this.
I think maybe for me, my goal in like doing this work, and I think it's the thing that keeps me inspired and motivated. Because I think back, to myself as like a little kid, and like seeing other people who are like trailblazers, like in the field, and just knowing that like if knowing that I could be successful because of the things that they did and that they contributed, right? And I want to serve as like that point of inspiration, so that other gamers or other Black little girls, like can see my success and say, hey, like I can do that too. I also just want to like make legible. I always like making like my hustle legible, so people can see all the labor and the energy that's like behind it. I think that's the thing that we don't talk about enough. And Courtney, I always appreciate like talking about, hey, it's just me. I'm one person. I'm trying to do this. I remember you had a post talking about like how long it took to do like one of the reviews, and I think that people have to be like reminded that there are just like people behind these things. and it takes energy, and we're like humans behind it. So maybe we just keep the human at front and center, and like a lot of these conversations, maybe that's what I would impart.
I love that, and I like that phrase, make my hustle legible. Did you just come up with that on the
So
fly?
good.
You should write things.
I should write that.
You should
Yeah,
write- you
I
should
didn't
be a
know it was
writer.
dope. I didn't know it was awesome.
I love it. Make your hustle legible.
We need t-shirts.
We need
T-shirts are next.
That's good. I would say for me, I think my core professional identity is being a teacher. And, traditionally I thought of that as being in a classroom. And now I've expanded that to include writing and books and newsletters. I try to use the exact same voice that I use in the classroom in my writing and in my writing in the classroom. And I have found that this gets back to like, what is the why? Like once I finally realized that was my why, it crystallized a lot of things. And so I think for me, it's getting clear on that for myself. And then I would say for the industry, I think this is an industry that can't decide if it's a business or not. I mean, I understand they have shareholders and all that, but they don't always operate like a business. They seem to have this portfolio approach where they expect most books to lose money and just a couple to make money. And again, if that is what's going on, I don't understand why they're not taking more risks, quite frankly. I think the business person in me says that should actually encourage risk taking, not discourage it. So I'd love to see that mindset.
That's amazing. And yes, I also wrote down make my hustle legible. That's completely a t-shirt, 100%.
You'll love your next book.
I know, seriously. Make it a thing. Courtney, I didn't know we were setting intentions. Now we're going to have to make these things public. So you caught me at kind of a funny place in my career, because, I am still very much a writer and very, very much an educator, but like Dolly, I'm finding that pivoting a little bit. And I think when I ask the question, what is most important to me, I'm looking at the fields that I've been active in for some time now, that have been a long-term part of my life. And I'm looking at the humanitarian world, and I'm looking at the outdoors world, and I'm looking at the literature world. And these are all spaces that are all predominantly and in some ways, unfortunately, actually in many ways, unfortunately, dominated by white people, or by this idea of colonialism as a backbone, right? Definitely in the humanitarian sector, and certainly in the outdoors world, where so many people abide by John Muir, who was an absolute racist, and there's a lot of problems with his theologies and the way that the parks our national parks and our public lands are built and advertised, right? So what I'm pivoting towards now is leaning further into the inadvertent work that I've done at being a part of the white community, right? And leveraging that to help to educate the people that I have populated my life with about what it means to be a marginalized population in America. What it means to wake up one day and realize that I couldn't be white, right? And to really try and help people to see another way of looking at things, right? And that I think is going to occupy a lot of time, but I'm so glad to know that there are people like you all out there who are doing a lot of the same work, in lots of different ways. And it's just an inspiration to me to be able to sit here with you all and have these conversations. It's really amazing.
Cool.
I couldn't agree more. This is particularly meaningful. Like I feel like I haven't been part of a series of conversations like this before.
Cool. Well, then I think that is it. That is the end of part 2 with what we hope publishing and literature industry does to be more inclusive and accessible. I hope that everyone watching enjoyed our talks. And again, congratulations to the 2 people that won the raffle in the first video. And thank you all for your time.
Thanks, everybody.